All right, welcome back. And so we'll continue on looking at other plants and how to properly prune them. And so here we have the example that I shown before, the traveler's palm. And so one of the first things that you need to ask yourself is, what is the natural growth habit of this plant? In the case of the bird of paradise, we know that it is a clumping individual. In the case of the New Zealand flax, it's going to be the same thing. In the case of our pencil cactus here, it's going to be more of an upright multi-branch plant. And even our Eugenia here, which has been made into a pillar, would be a multi-branch individual. So once you have determined what is the natural growth habit, then you can determine what are going to be some of the stems that need to be kept and what some of them that are going to be removed. As in the case of our traveler's palm, the space where it was growing does not allow for more than one stem to remain. And so that was the work that was done. If the space was bigger, then several stems can be chosen to remain, and that could be the frame of the plant. And so we have the work that was done by Frank and I. You can see a very narrow area. You can see several shoots that if this had a more space, they could have been kept. But at the end, we decided to just keep that one individual that happened to be in the right place, and that became the one single stem traveler's palm. When you come across other plants, most likely you're going to come across the giant bird of paradise. So here's an example of one that has probably not been kept, but we do see some of them, some stems that are looking good, some stems that are going to be remaining. So in this case, I will keep about 5. Again, that's not a magic number, so you determine whether it be 3, whether it be 1, whether it be 5, whether it be 10. If the space lends itself for having several stems, then that would be great. So 5, the other thing is that you can clean or deadhead some of the old flower clusters that we have here, and then some of the old leaf bases that are no longer serving a purpose, and that's going to make the plant look a lot cleaner. So you can remove those. Here's a different view. So we can see several of them, stems. We have one here, we have one here, we have one here. That's an option. And then you keep the ones that are in the right place, and you remove the ones that are below that are just going to make the plants too messy and not attractive. As the plant starts getting too high, you can bring it down in size by forecasting and allowing a young shoot to grow in that same location. And so that when that young shoot gets to a certain height, then you can go ahead and remove the big one, and that will bring it down in size, allowing the young shoot to eventually get bigger and taller and fill in some of that gap. So you can remove some of the larger stems to bring the plant back in size and allow some young ones, select some young ones to take over in that space. So here's a nicer looking one. So you can see some of the main stems that have been kept, at least at some point they were selected, and they look kind of nice, but as time went by, they have allowed some more to remain, and now it looks a little bit messy, so it requires a little bit of work. Here's some that are a little bit better kept. So they kept 3 or 4 here. They removed the bottom ones, and they did the same thing over here, kind of matching the palms that are in the front. So that's ideally what you want to have. Now there is the other, or the smaller bird of paradise, that you can do the same thing, select individual shoots that may be in the right location. So if this becomes too thick and you wanted to thin it out, so remove entire shoots that come from the ground, and that will open it, as well as removing some of the old flower spikes, so deadheading, and that's going to make it look a lot nicer. Now, it is also very important that when you are going to be cutting some of the leaves, that you cut them as close to the base as possible, because the petals, as you can see here, will simply die out and they are going to become sharp and very, very dangerous. So be careful with that. So cut them as close to the base as possible, but you can once again thin out some of the shoots if this clump is getting too thick or too, and you wanted to open it up. This is what you don't want to do. Once again, somebody just went ahead and started doing the boxing. So they've just been cutting them, making it look like a pillar, and definitely making it look unattractive. So you don't want to do this. Select individuals, get rid of the rest, and you can bring it back into shape and size if that is going to be a problem. Now we can look at something like bananas, and the word monocarpic needs to be now taken into consideration, because these are going to be plants that are going to be growing for many years, and once they have flower, and in the case of banana have produce a fruit, then the entire shoot needs to be cut. Because it's going to die. So it's just a matter of time. So this shoot that has the banana already there, harvest the banana, get rid of this entire stalk from the base, and the same thing with this one, allowing the remaining ones to continue on. And so you can also select certain number that is up to you that you want to keep, and you can gradually thin out the cluster. But keep in mind, because is there going to ever be a need for you to completely cut down your banana? The answer is perhaps, as in the case we have here, where it has cold damage. So every so often we do get our cold season. And so if something like this happens, don't be afraid. Cut it to the ground, cut every single stalk, they'll come back. So from the ground, it's going to start all over again, but in a few years, you're going to have a fresh new banana clusters and also some fruit. And so it would be not good if you cut only the leaves, because it's going to look too ugly. So cut the stalks to the ground and let it rejuvenate. And let it grow from the base again. So that would be the only case where you might have to completely cut the banana plants. And the same thing would be with the gingers. So here we have a smaller individual. I know we kind of work with some of this prior to us leaving, but this cluster is getting too thick, too big. So look at the ones that have finished flowering, and as soon as they are done flowering, you can go inside and cut them as close to the ground as possible, allowing for young ones to have that space, and those ones will flower later on. So get rid of entire stalks once they have finished flowering. And the same thing with this canna that I found on a parkway. You have individuals that are starting to flower, great, we want those. And then you have individuals that finish flowering, those should have already been taken out to keep this clump looking a little bit nicer and cleaner and better behaved. So that's how I would go in there. So these are the leaves that look really ugly from the individuals that flowered last year that should have been taken out, but they were not. Here is a very nice use of a natural growing horsetail. So here's a Japanese garden style. So we have horsetail here grown high, because that's how it's supposed to be, and very nice in use of it. Here's once again where it's placed and people don't want to let it grow naturally. So it's in the bed, and it's made into a box, cut in half every single year. This one, it's recovering, but it's going to be a few months before it gets cut again. And if we take a closer look, you can see where it has been cut. There has been some dieback, making the plant not look as attractive. On the other side, We have the same thing, just a little bit worse. All the stems that have died back, and it'll keep coming, but in the meantime, it's going to look really ugly. Once again, put it in the right location, let it grow naturally, don't make it into a box. Here we have some fortnight lilies. One of the most important thing with them, when they flower, the flower spike is perennial. So make sure that you only clean them and you keep them. You clean them to make it look nice, but you keep them because they keep producing more flowers year after year. So if you take away the flower clusters or the flower spike, then the plant has to make new ones and it's going to slow down the flowers for them. This is at the Children Miller's Hospital. Here, very nicely planted around a tree, looking nice because they have not been butchered. Here's where they've been made into a box. Once again, they've just been sheared and cut, and you can see horrible pruning cuts where there's just, the leaves are not meant to be sheared, and that's what they're doing. So once again, if this is now the case where you need to get to this point, dig it out, select one or two younger clumps, put them back in place, give them several more years before they need to grow out into their individual space. So this is not what you want to see. I understand there is going to be a need because they're getting a little bit too far out. Just dig out clumps, dig them out, get them out of the way, leave the ones in the center, they'll grow back and you don't need to see this ugly pruning. The same thing with heavenly bamboo. Do not ever cut it in half. If you need to thin out the clump, take individual stems at the base, cut them, remove them. The plant is going to look very nice. Fortunately, in our college, they get cut in half and they look really, really ugly. So for heavenly bamboo, stems at the base, just thin out a few, looks a lot nicer. And or if you need to bring them down in size, just leave the young ones to come up and remove some of the taller ones as they're getting too tall for their space. So here's some Schefflera, Chinese, Hawaiian dwarf Schefflera. Here's one that has not been kept, but this gives us a good idea of where we can start. So here, again, we have some branches that can be exposed. So if we compare this to one that has been kept a little bit better, this is one that we would have gotten to eventually. But here's the same plant, which has been exposed. So we have allowed the branches to be exposed. It's a little bit thinner. You can see a little bit through it, makes it looks a lot nicer. And also, if you want to see, when it was recently pruned, I went back and I found some photographs. So you can see a much better branching pattern and a lot more open, and you can see through it. Still retaining kind of the natural growth habit, but showing the nice branching stems that can be done with the one that I showed you before. And here's just a different view so you can see. Hibiscus, we're going to have many of them. Unfortunately, many people don't understand them. They can be a nice addition with the flowers. You can train them in many different forms. You can let them become a tree if you want. So once again, what is the space and what is the natural growth habit? The natural growth habit is for it to be very large. However, people are going to make them into boxes. Which it's amazing that they still flower. But anyway, best to just select a couple of nice branches, let it have a natural growth pattern, and not make it into a box like you see here. We have also some of our sago palms or cycads. The most important thing about them is that they only produce a single cluster of leaves every single year. And so even if you see ugly leaves, you might want to wait. And as soon as you see the new leaves coming from the center, then you can go ahead and cut the old ones if they are look really ugly. Because the new ones will come out, they'll replace the old ones, and they're gonna look nice. So you might need to sacrifice them, or you might have to be patient If they look, they don't look good until the young ones begin to come out. Otherwise, you're just going to have a stick for a certain period of time until the young ones emerge. So make sure that nothing happens to the young emerging leaves, because if there's any damage, you're gonna have to live with it for an entire season until a brand new cluster of leaves are produced. So all the leaves that you see here are produced in one single year. So here's where they've done a little bit of a cleanup. So yes, removing some of the old leaves and just keeping the ones that are nice and fresh and happy is what you should be doing to avoid them being very cluttered and unkept. Our dwarf bottle brush, hardly any real pruning. Best thing is to leave them alone. Let them do their thing. If you need to just head back a few of those branches, bring it down in size, selectively thin out and head back any branches that you might need. Otherwise, it's practically fine by itself. And the same thing with some of our lion's tails and or our sages. It's going to be almost in the same category. You can deadhead them as needed and then head back to a lateral branching or some leaves at any point, just to keep encouraging more flowers and more flowers throughout the season. But otherwise, it's best to just head them back and cut only whatever is necessary. So here's our lion's tail. So here's an assortment of other shrubbery here. We have our Perosporum, crassifolium here, some of the dwarfer form that have this natural clumping habit or kind of like ball. They create that ball naturally. We have a miniature or a small olive here that is going to be beginning to be trained as a small tree. And then we have an assortment of other shrub perennial plants there. We have our honey flower here, Amelianthus, with our rock rose. That is looking very nice for the space that was given, and even our trellis, that is not bad. So again, natural growth habit, not making into a box, is going to be very important. And with that, I will let you be and have a great day. Take care. Bye.